All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL prop betting video. Going to be breaking down the top prop bets for this Thursday night showdown between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's go ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and start out here with a quick game preview, guys. Looking at the point spread, it is a 4.5 point spread in favor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which could be interesting. The Bucs could be getting a little bit healthier at receiver as well. Mike Evans could be back in this one. Jalen McMillan could be back in this one. That is going to make a difference in regards to some of the bets that we're going to be on later on in this slate. But that would kind of point to, I would say, the Bucs winning by 4.5 points. Both teams have been kind of unimpressive lately, and a lot of that has been due to not so good quarterback play. I know Emeka Bucca's had some bad drops for Tampa Bay. That's part of it as well for Baker's struggles, but kind of an interesting matchup. I could see potentially getting to Atlanta for the money line if you guys wanted to find a bet for that you guys kind of like. I don't hate it, but I also don't think we need to do that. You can get it at plus 210 at William Hill. For American books, the best one that you can get out there is about 205. That's probably the best way I would go about attacking this. I feel like it's more of a toss-up. You could bet on the Falcons to cover, but I could also see the Falcons just getting absolutely blown out as well because Kirk Cousins has definitely struggled, and it's basically shut down Bijan Robinson, and that's the difference. Now, looking at the game total, I'm actually surprised by this. I would have thought it would be a little bit lower than this. It's at 44.2, and I think that might be due to two things. The Bucs defense hasn't been all that great, and the Falcons defense prior to last week kind of was on a little bit of a skid where they were struggling. And so I kind of think the Falcons defense, that was a good week for them last week. I think they're going to be good to go, kind of back to normal somewhat, or at least not being a very easy matchup like they were for the past 3 weeks. And so I think that's what's going into that. So I ultimately don't hate the under, but I wouldn't say any of those are must bets there in regards to the game. Let's go ahead and get to some of the top prop bets. And I want to start out with probably my favorite bet for the game. That is not a fantasy score prop bet, because we're getting some pretty good fantasy score prop bet. So my favorite bet would be Chris Godwin to get over 3.5 receptions. This bet has about a 51.3% likely to hit. The reason why I like this bet is kind of just how good he's looked over the past 2 weeks now, guys. He ended up getting 8 targets in last week's game, 8 receptions, 55 receiving yards, only ended up with 45 air yards, which I'm kind of okay with. If we're going to get 8 targets on 45 air yards, that leads to kind of easier receptions for him to make. He ended up playing 83% of the routes and then 79% total snaps. Now, sure, if Jalen McMillan and Mike Evans are back, that would not necessarily be a great thing for Chris Godwin. Maybe his number goes down a little bit, but I just think that would mean that someone like Tez Johnson and Sterling Shepard, their snaps would get reduced, because I don't think Evans and McMillan would instantly get a full snap share. And so if that happens, I kind of see Godwin being the receiver number 1 here for the Bucs, and I think this ends up being a pretty good bet for us. Now, what people are not going to like is looking at the last few games game log, and I get that. He did drop a touchdown in that game against the Arizona Cardinals as well. Don't necessarily love that there. And then prior to that, guys, he just wasn't getting enough snaps for us to truly warrant any really over bets for him. It's really over the last 2 weeks where he's gotten a significant snap share, and then last week was his most snaps that we've seen him get recently. So if we can lock in around, let's just say 70+% of the snaps, I feel good about that bet. And it is worth calling out, guys, that over the last 4 weeks, the Falcons have given up the most receptions to opposing receivers as well, which obviously that should be a good thing there for Chris Godwin. Now, a lot of people are probably going to want to bet on Emeka Bucca as well. I'd be kind of okay with that. We are getting a pretty big prop line difference for his receiving yards. So if you think he's going to end up having a good day, obviously you'd want to bet on his over on underdog, guys, 43.5 there. He ended up with 132 air yards, 9 targets, but only 2 receptions. He's actually been someone that's been struggling lately, which is kind of could go 2 ways. You love that he is still getting the opportunities to have the production there, and then you would argue that he is due to just have a better game. And so I don't mind that logic. I think that's solid. At the same time, he has been struggling. He's definitely in a weird slump right now. And if you look at a lot of his early season production, a lot of his production was actually just Baker Mayfield just putting on perfect passes. And I know a lot of people in the fantasy football community were posting stats about that, and other people were memeing those stats. Well, we're kind of finally seeing those stats come true, those lack of separation stats. So he needs to catch the ball more. I don't hate the idea of betting on his over receiving yards. I think that's good enough to get to. The projection data has him about 50.6, so definitely shop around on that line there as well, guys. And then one of my favorite bets on the slate is actually going to be Bijan Robinson to get over 16.5 rush attempts. Now, if you think that the Bucs are going to win by more than 4.5 points there, you probably wouldn't want to get to this one. But again, I could kind of see the Falcons win this. And the way that they would do that is by rushing the football with Bijan Robinson like they have basically done all the time. Like that's just what they do. Now, the flip side of that is you might get a few receptions in replace of some rush attempts that he would typically get. And if we look at his game log, guys, we're going to like the game log there as well, where he's gone the over, for all the past 5 games. And so, yeah, I think that ends up being a pretty decent spot for us overall. And then we need to go ahead and get to Kirk Cousins, guys. Now, with Kirk Cousins, it has been rough, okay? Just not good film. Did have a touchdown callback last week to Darnell Mooney. That definitely changes, I think, the narrative of what we're thinking about him a little bit. But, yeah, it just hasn't been all that great. I am considering getting to his over INTs here. That could potentially be a bet. I actually really like the idea of betting on his under fantasy score on underdog. They actually have it at about 13.8 right now as I'm recording this. PrizePicks has it at 12. So if you think he's going to get the over, you can bet the over. I actually like the under a little bit more on underdog with that fantasy score. A bet that I'm interested in getting to is his over passing yards of 204. I think a lot of people are actually betting on the under, which I kind of understand when you look at the last 5-game average, but I do like this matchup here, guys. Tampa Bay over the last 4 games has given up an average of 200 and almost 60 passing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. And if Atlanta's playing from behind, that's obviously going to dictate more of a pass-heavy approach. And so I don't hate that idea. I think that ends up being a decent bet for us to get to. But again, I think I actually like the under a little bit more so there on underdog. And with that being said, let's jump into some other pretty big prop line differences that we were getting between the two sites, PrizePicks and underdog. Well, the first one, guys, is going to be Baker Mayfield for his under fantasy score on underdog as well. Now, if you guys think he's going to have a good game, this is a good middle. You could bet the over on PrizePicks. Data is basically telling us it will be a middle. I think the Atlanta Falcons defense is going to be better in this game than what we saw, over the past month or so. And if that ends up being the case, that's somewhat like their AJ Terrell should be good to go in this game. And so that's part of it as well. And that's kind of why I'm more leaning towards Baker to maybe not have a great game and get his under fantasy score there on underdog. And then, guys, we don't necessarily know whether or not Mike Evans is going to be active, but this is pretty insane. I would say the lines that we're getting for him and then another receiver on underdog, the PrizePicks line is basically the underdog line, okay? And I say that because although the quarterback position is just a 1-for-1 swap with how it's calculated, the PrizePicks and underdog calculations are slightly different. Half-point PPR on underdog, full-point PPR on PrizePicks. So the fact that underdog basically has the same line as PrizePicks is pretty crazy because obviously they're not really equating for receptions as much. And then same thing here with Darnell Mooney. Now, Darnell Mooney actually don't mind for an anytime touchdown bet, but we got a pretty significant prop line difference for him. It's basically the exact same line that we're getting between PrizePicks and underdog. So I almost just think we have to bet the under on underdog there, given that line that we are getting. And so, guys, this is what I'm looking at for the bet of the day on underdog, and then we'll get into some PrizePicks bets. I think this ends up being a pretty good spot for us to get to overall. Maybe pick and choose a little bit better because we're running out 2 quarterback and receiver stacks, so the payout is going to be reduced. So I never typically like to do that, but I do think this is putting a pretty good foot forward for us. And then let's go ahead and jump into some other bets that I also like as well, guys. Kyle Pitts to go over 5.5 receptions. He has been the top pass catcher for Kirk Cousins over the past 2 games. Last week, guys, ended up playing 90% of the snaps once again. Ended up getting 10 targets, 97 air yards, 6 receptions for 90 yards. He also goes against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that have given up a ton of production to opposing tight ends, about 6 per game as well. And so I think that all kind of equates to Kyle Pitts having another good game. Theoretically, he should be able to do that. Now, if he doesn't do that, well, obviously it's going to be because of his pass catchers having a good game. And so I don't necessarily love the lines that we're getting for like Darnell Mooney. Like the only bet I like for him is potentially betting on him to score a touchdown. He is playing a lot of snaps, had an 87% route share, ended up with 4 targets. Like not necessarily great, but kind of okay, I guess. David Sills ended up playing the most snaps, guys, 90% of the snaps, and so he is kind of an interesting play there. And then Dylan Drummond, who we don't have a line for, he actually played had a 71% route share, ended up with 3 catches for 21 yards and 5 targets. They all had between like 30 and 40 air yards, though, so very lackluster there. They also did just sign Malik Heath. I doubt he plays, but I mean, maybe. Like him and Sills and like Drummond, I probably would give the edge to Heath a little bit there. So it'd be interesting to see him play. And then I will say, guys, in a weird way, if I am doing that Bijan Robinson over rush attempts, I actually kind of like the Tyler Algier over rush attempts as well, because theoretically that would be the game plan. And so the issue with that is that doesn't necessarily coincide with maybe Kyle Pitts for over his receptions as well, although it could, or Kirk Cousins for over his passing yards. That would be the concern there, but I kind of like this bet as well. And so we'll go ahead and get into the PrizePicks bet of the day, which is going to be more of the traditional sportsbook bets that I like. Chris Godwin over his receptions, just kind of assuming he's going to be in that top pass catcher role there for the Bucs. Kyle Pitts over 5.5 receptions, and then Bijan Robinson for over his rush attempts. Now, you guys will realize I did not mention Bucky Irving or Rachaad White. They actually ended up with a 50% snap share last week. A little bit of that, I think, was due to Irving getting a little bit banged up and just not really having that many rush yards. And so I'm just kind of staying away from those two the most. And so that's really why I didn't bring them up. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Good luck with all your bets. If you guys want access to that 9to5 PrizePicks optimizer, head on over to 9to5sports.com, get access to that and all the other tools available on the website for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.